Welcome to today's video. We have some very interesting topics. You're in the right spot to find out what's happening, and that is what's happening in Syria. We have some interesting video clips from the mother of all talk shows, from George Galloway, where he is interviewing and talking with a Syrian journalist, Kevork AlMassian, from the Syrian Analysis channel. He is a very good journalist, and he is from Aleppo, and that is where all the conflict is happening in and around Aleppo. And he's going to tell us what is happening there. And I think it's better to hear it from someone who knows a lot more about it than I do. I'm going to give my reaction. I have a very short clip of a Turkish politician, and I'm going to give my reaction to him too. I encourage you to stick around until the end. Yeah, before we get started, please like the video and write a comment. Please subscribe to the channel so you can get more news. Let's just look very quickly here. We see a map of Syria. Here is Aleppo right here. And Aleppo is under control. The red is the Syrians. Aleppo is under control of Syria and some rebels. And we're going to talk about who these rebels are. I'm actually going to show you some clips before I give my comment. Just before I show you the clips, these groups, they came in, surprised the Syrian military and the Russians. Yes, Russia comes up again. Russia is in Syria, invited by the Syrian government to help hold the peace, and they help fight some of these groups before. They are an ally, so this is definitely a front in the war against Russia as well. Syria, they're getting screwed over, basically. That is the long and short of it. We see here, we got yellow. That's controlled by the U.S. That's where all the oil is. Donald Trump has told us that. Donald Trump, to his credit, though, did try to kind of back out a bit, but Biden has definitely put the U.S. back in this area here. This is Syria, and these are these so-called rebel groups. But I'm going to show you the clip from George Galloway with Kevork AlMassian, and then I'm going to give you my thoughts.
The head choppers, throat cutters, heart eaters of the so-called Syrian opposition, although very few of them appear to be Syrian, are on the march again and on the front pages, leading the news bulletins. But this time, the West is right behind them. This should come as no surprise. It has long been a certainty for me that the so-called ISIS and Al-Qaeda phenomenon is at the very least closely coordinated with Western and indeed Israeli interests. They are the people who have supplied the knives that are cutting the throats of the people in Aleppo. They are the people who provided the American armored personnel carriers, the Toyota pickup trucks that conquered Mosul in the past and are in possession now of the sacred and ancient city of Aleppo. The Western media know who these people are. More importantly, they know what these people are. And that if they were to be able, God forbid, to raise their black flag over the ancient city and civilization of Damascus, on the shore of the Mediterranean Sea, the European lake, that it would be disastrous for everybody concerned, except Israel. These people who are ready to fight and die, to kill Muslims in Syria, to overthrow an Arab government, haven't so much as broken a window in an Israeli consulate anywhere in the world. These people are openly praising the Israeli government for its attacks on the resistance in Lebanon and its bombardment of targets inside Syria almost on a daily basis. They openly thank Netanyahu. So I've got a question for those who think it's oh so complicated, who think that although we were against the American British invasion and occupation of Iraq, we should somehow, by some twist of logic, be in favor of an American and British inspired conspiracy to occupy Syria to overthrow the government of the Syrian Arab Republic? This is my question. Why do you think the Anglo-American empire is invading Syria right now? Is it for the interests of the Syrian people? Is it for the interests of the Arabs? Is it for the interests of the Muslims of whichever confession or sect? Or is it to use an insurgency to weaken the resistance to Israeli crimes? You don't need to be Einstein to work out the answer to that question. It's there right in front of you. If you'll only open your eyes, wipe your eyes of sectarian foolishness, you will see that that is exactly the intention. And it's not a secret. When Israel set up field hospitals in 2014 on the occupied Golan Heights to treat the wounded of the so-called Syrian opposition, it was obvious then that these forces are in lockstep. Kevork AlMassian is an award-winning journalist and political analyst specializing in Middle Eastern and Mediterranean affairs. He is the host of Syriana Analysis, an independent political commentary channel. Kevork is of Armenian origin from the historic city of Aleppo in Syria. Kevork, welcome to the show. First of all, my condolences as a citizen of Aleppo. It must be very, very hard to see these head choppers back in the streets of your city. Tell us.
Indeed, George. And one wonders how many times can we restore our city, and how many times shall we liberate our city, reconstruct our lives, our homes, our businesses. It is tiring to live half of your life basically in such a war and devastation, and trying to take care of your family, of your beloved ones in the country, and then everything turns upside down again. Now, what is happening in Aleppo, in my opinion, is not shocking for me. It was anticipated. I was detecting the movement of the militants since late September, and I have reported about it multiple times, and I knew that there is going to be a big attack on Aleppo, especially after a ceasefire agreement is reached in Lebanon. People usually cannot really make these connections between what's happening in Lebanon, with Gaza, and then with Syria. But you're one of the very few people who get it right on Syria and get it right in Palestine. This is very rare to see an intellectual or journalist who understand the geopolitical landscape in the region from this lens, because usually people are watching what's happening in Palestine and think what's happening in Syria is a separate thing. It is not. The so-called uprising in Syria has been engineered by the CIA since 2011, and in order to topple a regime, they call it a regime in Damascus, for the sake of Israel. This is something that many people do not get. Now that Aleppo has fallen, George, what is going to be next? This is the real question. In order for the Syrian army to push against these militants again in northern Hama, and they move on the highway to Aleppo, this will take months to probably even years, just like it was the case in 2012. So we returned basically to the point of 2012, and even worse now when it comes to Aleppo. And these multinational takfiris were unleashed first by Turkey, and second by the US in cooperation with the Israeli intelligence. And I would try to explain why this is a mutual interest between Turkey and Israel now in Aleppo. For Turkey, they see that Donald Trump is coming to the White House in the coming weeks, and Trump wants to withdraw the American occupation forces from Syria, and he wants to impose certain compromises in the region. So Erdogan rushed and unleashed these takfiris on Aleppo for him to have a better position when the time of negotiations come, and for when the time of the compromise comes. Now, during this time, the Israelis, when they reached to a so-called ceasefire agreement in Lebanon, they have sent demands to Syria. And the Jordanian foreign minister a few weeks ago, he was in Damascus and he delivered the American demands. Once the ceasefire agreement achieved, they were expecting from Damascus to close all the supply chains to Hezbollah and to strangle Hezbollah, basically, and to try to degrade Hezbollah and completely annihilate it from the Lebanese society. And the Syrian government said no. So if you remember, the same night of the ceasefire agreement, Netanyahu gave a video speech and he said, I'm quoting him, Assad is playing with fire. And only a few hours later, around 6 hours later, all these multinational terrorists were unleashed from Idlib to Aleppo to conquer Aleppo because Assad rejected the demand of the Israeli and the American side to strangle Hezbollah, which if Syria does that, Hezbollah is not only a strategic ally for Syria, it is also a major component of the axis of resistance and also a major supporter of the Palestinian cause. So even from an opportunistic point of view, if you see it beside the strategies and the politics, Syria has no interest at all to strangle its own ally in Lebanon. So now we have a situation that the Syrian army has to overstretch in the country again. And this could lead or pave the way for a possible Israeli incursion into the Syrian territories from the Golan Heights intersection, because they have been installing new spying technology, cameras, and also they send reinforcement to the Golan Heights. And surprise, surprise, yesterday, the so-called militants in the southern part of Syria, in the Horan area, where they joined the reconciliation process with the government, they said that they are going to attack Damascus now. So from all sides, they are trying to topple the government again and to finish this file all once and for all for the sake of Israel. But many people, George, and this is what really bothers me, the people who support Palestine specifically, they don't see this strategic aspect of this conflict. And you mentioned it, there are many people fall for the sectarian lines, and also they have been psyoped by multiple media outlets and think tankers in the region and abroad.
I have to definitely agree with both of them, with George Galloway, the former British member of parliament, and the journalist, Mr. Kevork, and they definitely know a lot more about it than I do, because obviously they have more on-the-ground experience and more hands-on experience. What I see here is that the Turkish government, for whatever reason, had decided to break their treaty, and I think that's a very terrible thing, and I think the Turkish people, and they need to stand up and say no, because this is basically a NATO proxy, and they're also backed by the Z State, as was talked about, and the Z State is very much wanting these groups to wreak havoc, to cut off Lebanon, and to just destroy the Middle East, because they want to make their greater Z State. So, of course, they got these extremists working together. The Z State, they are extremists, and so are these groups like the HTS, and I'm actually going to prove it to you by showing you something from the Quran. We'll start with the Quran. So if we go to the second chapter of the Quran, is the surah or the chapter of Al-Baqarah, the cow, and we're going to look at verses 8 through 12. So verse 8 says, and of the people are some who say, we believe in Allah, Allah is God, and the last day, but they are not believers. They think to deceive Allah, God, and those who believe, and they deceive not except themselves, and perceive it not. And their hearts is disease, so Allah, God, has increased their disease, and for them is a painful punishment, because they habitually used to lie. And when it said to them, do not cause corruption on the earth, they say, we are but reformers. Yeah, that's exactly what we heard from Mr. Galloway and Mr. Kevork. Yeah, that's exactly describing these groups. We got one more verse here. It says, unquestionably, it is they who are the corrupters, but they perceive it not. So, yeah, the Quran is definitely talking about these type of people. There's different names for them in the media. Different names for them, of course. Hypocrites, Munafiq, right? Takfiri. We hear Wahhabi. I think Hawarij is probably actually a better term in Arabic. Yeah, we have some Hadith, which are basically the teaching of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And he talks about these type of people too. And we have one here. This one comes from Sunan Abi Dawood, is one of the books of the Hadith of Islam. one of the teachings. All these Hadith, they are graded, right? Different scholars have come along, and they have checked the chains of narration, and they have checked to see if they are correct. Who are the people that have narrated them? Are they trustworthy? Since I'm not a scholar, I have to follow what the scholars say, because I'm definitely not a religious scholar. Yeah, but this one is great. It says it's Sahih, or authentic, according to Sheikh Albani, and he was a very famous scholar in Islam, I think about 100 years ago, and he has studied extensively, devoting his life to the study of Islam. So I think he knows a lot more about it than I do. So I'm going to go by what he says. And he says here that this is authentic. It says here, Anas ibn Malik reported, the messenger of Allah, peace and blessings be upon him, said, there will be a division in sectarianism in my nation, and the people will come with beautiful words and evil deeds. They will recite the Quran, but it will not pass beyond their throats. They will leave the religion as an arrow leaves its target, and they will not return to it as the arrow does not return to its bow. They are the worst of the creation. Blessed are those who fight them and are killed by them. They call to the book of Allah, but they have nothing to do with it. Whoever fights them is better to Allah than them. Yeah, we see like the Turks, well, I wouldn't say the Turkish people, but whoever's in charge of the Turkish government, the Turkish military, they're backing these groups like HTS, and this is exactly what the Prophet had warned about. And yeah, the president of Turkey, he has talked very nicely about supporting Palestine, supporting Gaza, but he never did anything to help them. His speeches were very nice, and it made a lot of people motivated, probably, including some of his population, and maybe some of those people that went and tried to help somehow. And I think a lot of Turkish people have also been to Turkey, and many of them are good people, and I think they have good intentions, but the Turkish government has a very long history, and that is a different topic. President Erdogan, he has tried to play both sides, and he definitely made an agreement with the Russians and the Iranians and the Syrians who are also Muslim. I think about 75% of the population is Muslim. As Kevork said, there's a large Christian minority, and they have lived in peace together, just as is taught by the Quran. It seems here that the Turkish government, at least, has decided to take the side of the hypocrites, the Munafiq, as we talked about in the Quran I just read, and they are supporting these groups that are, as it says here, that the Prophet said, were the worst of creation. And he has said that they should be fought, and it looks like that's exactly what Syria, Russia, and I think some of these groups in Lebanon and Iraq and Iran, and even the Arab states, they are trying to do. Yeah, they are doing exactly what they should be doing. And yeah, if you break a treaty in Islam, that's considered to be a very bad thing. So believe that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he had said that if there's an injustice that was created by a Muslim against a non-Muslim, he would stand with the non-Muslim. We can see there's a lot of justice in Islam, and there is in the other religions too, but people take them to extreme. And there is another one here, which I think is very interesting. This one is narrated by Ibn Kathir. Ibn Kathir was also a great scholar of Islam. It was back several hundred years ago. Some of these groups, they take the fabrications, or they take them to extreme, and it's very important for scholars to correct people, and it's very important that we look at the authentic things here, and that's what we're trying to do. So it says, Ibn Kathir said, if the Hawarij, that is groups like HTS and ALQ groups and some of these other ones, ever gained power, they would corrupt the entire land, Iraq and Syria. Yeah, there it is right there. They would not leave alone a boy or a girl or a man or a woman. For in their view, the people have become so corrupt that they cannot be reformed but by mass killing. Yeah, these people are very dangerous, and I think the majority of the Muslims and majority of people in the world, they know what is right, and we just have to get through what is in the news and actually look at it and think about it critically. I do have a short clip from a Turkish politician, and I think he's from a minority party, but I do want to show the short clip that showed up on Middle Eastern Eye.
Şu gerçeğe millet huzurunda aykırmak, dava ve siyaset namusumuzun şaşmaz ve şüphe götürmez bir gereğidir. Halep deyince yüreği titremeyen bir vatan evladına rastlayamazsınız. Çünkü Halep iliklerine kadar Türk ve Müslümandır. Bunu sadece biz söylemiyoruz. Tarih söylüyor, coğrafya söylüyor, hakikat söylüyor, ecdat söylüyor, Halep kalesine çekilen Türk bayrağı söylüyor. İstanbul'un kapalı çarşısı neyse, Halep'in kapalı çarşısı odur. Ankara Kocatepe Camii'nden yükselen aminlerimizle Halep Ulu Camii'nden yankılanan aminlerimiz aynıdır. Halep oradaysa tarihin çağrısına kulağını veren Türk milliyetçileri ve Türk milleti buradadır.
Yeah, this politician. Yeah, he is admitting that the Turkish, they want to take Aleppo. I'm not sure that's something that all Turkish people will agree with. I'm sure there's probably a lot who don't. I'm going to believe that Aleppo should be a city for the Muslims. But there is a Christian minority, and there are other minorities, and it should be a city for all people, and it should be a peaceful city, and it should not be destroyed by one group of Muslims over another, and they should protect the minorities. And one last thing I want to look at, the capture of Jerusalem in 637, when Jerusalem was captured by the Arabs, by the Muslims. It was the second caliphate, second Khalifa of Islam, Omar ibn Khatib. He had captured Jerusalem, and he made a treaty. It says here that he made a treaty with the Byzantine, the Christians, the Romans. So they were called the Romans also. He met with the Patriarch Sophronius, a representative of the Byzantine government, as well as a leader in the Christian church. Sophronius actually surrendered the city of Jerusalem without a fight to the Muslims, to Omar ibn Khatib. Omar ibn Khatib, who was considered one of the great leaders in Islam, he left Medina, traveling alone with one donkey and one servant. When he arrived in Jerusalem, he was greeted by Sophronius, who undoubtedly must have been amazed that the Caliph, the leader of the Muslims, one of the most powerful people in the world at that point, was dressed in no more simple robes than was indistinguishable from his servant. They say that the servant was riding on the camel because he got tired, and Omar ibn Khatib was walking because he was so concerned about his companion here, his servant. So I said he was given a tour of the city, including the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. When the time for the prayer came, Sophronius invited Omar to pray inside the church, but Omar refused. He insisted that if he prayed there, later Muslims would use it as an excuse to convert it into a mosque, thereby depriving Christendom of one of its holy sites. Instead, Omar prayed outside the church and where a mosque, later called Masjid Omar, now in Palestine, in East Jerusalem, the Mosque of Omar, was later built, and he made a treaty. And as they did with the other cities they conquered, the Muslims had to write up treaties detailing the rights and privileges regarding the conquered people and the Muslims in Jerusalem. This treaty was signed by Omar and Patriarch Sophronius, along with some of the generals of the Muslim army. The text of the treaty read as followed. So we're going to read through this treaty really quick. It says, "In the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate, this is the assurance of safety, which the servant of God, Omar, the commander of the faithful, have given to the people of Jerusalem. He has given them an assurance of safety for themselves, for their property, their churches, their crosses, the sick and healthy of the city, and for all their rituals which belong to their religion. Their churches will not be inhabited by Muslims and will not be destroyed. Neither they nor the lands on which they stand, nor their cross, nor their property will be damaged. They will not be forcibly converted, and no Jew will live with them in Jerusalem." I think he actually made a different quarter, and they actually did start bringing in some Jewish people who were being persecuted, but it was in a different quarter of the city. The people of Jerusalem must pay the taxes like the people of other cities. They must expel the Byzantines and the robbers. Those of the people of Jerusalem who want to leave with the Byzantines, take their property, and abandon their churches and crosses will be safe. until they reach their place of refuge. The villagers may be remaining in the city if they wish, but must pay taxes like the citizens. Those who wish may go with the Byzantines, and those who wish may return to their families. Nothing is to be taken from them before their harvest is reaped. If they pay their taxes according to their obligation, then the condition laid out in this letter are under the covenant of God, are the responsibility of his prophet, of the caliphs, and of the faithful, quoted in the Great Arab Conquest from Tariq Tabari. So this was a very progressive treaty, even would be a progressive treaty, even at this time, I believe. I definitely don't see the Z-State or NATO countries making these kind of treaties. I think the Russians have actually done a better job. That's kind of what they've done in eastern Ukraine. That's a whole different animal, though, whole different topic. That's a different video. That's definitely not what these groups that the West, the Turks, and the Z-State are doing to Syria at the moment. And it's very terrible because they have Muslims or people who say they are Muslim, but they are not following their books, their teachings. They also have Jews and Christians doing the exact same thing, and it's causing a lot of trouble. So hopefully this has been an enlightening video, and I hope you stuck till the end. So I want to thank you for watching, and please like the video, share it with your friends. Hope to see you again in the very next video.